The August heat pressed against the windows of our house as I watched my son Danny arrange his toy dinosaurs in perfect rows on the living room carpet. He was 6 years old, careful and methodical in everything he did. Too careful, maybe too quiet for a kid his age. "Dad, can we skip the reunion?" he asked without looking up from his toys. I crouched beside him, studying his face. "Why would you want to skip it, buddy?" His small hands stilled on a plastic T-Rex. "Grandma Belinda says I talk funny." My jaw tightened. Belinda Brennan, my mother-in-law, had been making comments about Danny since he was born. His birth weight, his late walking, his slight speech impediment that we'd been working on with a therapist. Nothing was ever good enough for her. "You talk just fine," I said, ruffling his dark hair. "And we'll only stay for a couple hours." That was a lie. I knew Carla would want to stay all day. My wife lived for her family's approval, chasing it like a dog after a car. 5 years of marriage had taught me that the Brennans were a package deal. You married Carla, you married the whole toxic clan. I stood and walked to the kitchen where Carla was packing potato salad into a container. She'd been up since 6, cooking and fussing, making sure everything was perfect for her mother. "Carla," I said carefully, "maybe we should talk to your mom about the comments she makes about Danny." She didn't look up from sealing the container. "Greg, don't start. It's a family party. Can we please just have one day without drama?" "I'm not creating drama. I'm trying to protect our son." Now she looked at me, her green eyes flashing with that familiar defensiveness. "She's his grandmother. She loves him. You're too sensitive." I'd heard those words so many times they'd lost meaning. "You're too sensitive. You're overreacting. You don't understand family." But I did understand family. I just didn't understand theirs. Carla Brennan, now Carla Levine, though she still signed her maiden name on everything important, came from old money in Connecticut. Her family ran a successful commercial real estate business, owned half a dozen properties in Greenwich, and treated anyone outside their circle like servants. When we met 7 years ago at a charity auction, I was a freelance investigative journalist working on a piece about corrupt city contracts. She was there representing her father's company, beautiful and sharp in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Our courtship was fast, maybe too fast. She liked that I was different from the country club boys she'd grown up with. I liked that she seemed interested in my work, asking questions about my investigations, laughing at my stories about tracking down sources in dingy diners. Her family hated me from day one. Oscar Brennan, her father, looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his Italian leather shoe. "A journalist," he'd said at our first dinner, the word dripping with disdain. How noble. Belinda had been worse. Sweet to my face, poison behind my back. I'd overheard her on the phone once, telling someone I was acceptable for now and that Carla will come to her senses. When Danny was born, the criticism intensified. He was too small at birth. He cried too much. His eyes were too dark, like mine, instead of the Brennan blue. Carla absorbed every comment like gospel, second-guessing every parenting decision I made. But I stayed quiet. I documented. That was my training kicking in. Years of investigating corruption and corporate malfeasance had taught me patience. Watch, record, wait for the pattern to emerge. And there was a pattern. "Come on," Carla said, grabbing her purse. "We're going to be late." The Brennan estate sat on 4 acres of manicured lawn in Greenwich, a sprawling colonial with white columns and black shutters. Cars lined the circular driveway. Mercedes, BMWs, a Porsche that belonged to Carla's brother Sean. Old money on display. Danny's hand tightened in mine as we approached the back garden where 50 relatives had gathered. Long tables covered with white linens, catered food, waiters circulating with drinks. The Brennans didn't do casual barbecues. Gregory. Belinda appeared from the crowd, tall and elegant in a cream pantsuit, her silver hair styled perfectly. She air-kissed both my cheeks, her perfume overwhelming. "How lovely you could make it." Could make it. Like we had a choice. "Hi, Belinda," I said evenly. She bent down to Danny, her smile tight. "And there's my little grandson." You're quiet today, aren't you?" Danny pressed against my leg. "He's fine," I said, guiding him toward the food tables. Carla's sister Celeste cornered us by the shrimp cocktail. She was 2 years younger than Carla, Sharper, meaner. Greg, still doing that little writing thing. I consult now, I said. I'd left active journalism 2 years ago, burned out from the death threats and legal harassment that came with exposing powerful people. Now I helped law firms and corporations with opposition research. It paid better and kept me home with Danny Moore. Consulting, Celeste repeated with a smirk. How vague. Sean's been promoted to VP at the company. Youngest VP in Brennan Properties history. Sean Brennan was a mediocre businessman who'd inherited his position. I'd seen the company's financial reports. Carla had left them on our home computer once. Brennan Properties was leveraged to the hilt, held together by their reputation and Oscar's connections. That's great, I said, moving Danny along. We found a quiet spot under an oak tree. Danny sat in the grass, pulling at blades absently. I watched the Brennan clan mingle, laughing too loud, drinks flowing. Oscar was holding court near the pool, telling some story that had his audience captivated. Belinda flitted between groups, the perfect hostess. And then I saw her whisper something to Carla, both of them glancing toward Danny. The hair on the back of my neck rose. Tony Poole, my oldest friend and a corporate attorney, had warned me months ago. We'd been having drinks at a bar near his office when I'd confided about the situation with Carla's family. Greg, you need to protect yourself, he'd said. Document everything. Texts, emails, witnesses to their behavior. If this marriage goes south, you're going to need ammunition. It's not going south, I'd insisted. It's just her family. Tony had given me a look that said he didn't believe me. Her family is her. She chose them over you the day she married you. You just haven't accepted it yet. I dismissed him then. Now, watching my wife and mother-in-law whispering while my son sat alone in the grass, I wondered if Tony had been right all along. The incident happened during dessert. Everyone had gathered near the patio, plates of cake balanced on laps, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the lawn. Danny was standing near the dessert table, trying to decide between chocolate and vanilla, when Belinda appeared behind him with a permanent marker in her hand. I was 20 feet away, talking to Oscar's business partner about nothing important, when I heard the gasp ripple through the crowd. I turned. Belinda had gripped Danny's shoulder, holding him in place, and had written in bold, black letters across his forehead, "Unwanted." Time seemed to stop. Danny stood frozen, his eyes wide and confused. He couldn't see what she'd written, but he could feel the weight of 50 pairs of eyes on him. Some relatives had their hands over their mouths. Others were smirking. A few were nodding, like this was somehow appropriate. "So everyone knows what he is," Belinda announced loudly, stepping back to admire her work. The marker dangled from her fingers, black ink stark against her perfect cream outfit. I started moving toward my son, my vision tunneling. But before I could reach him, Carla stepped forward, not to defend Danny, not to scream at her mother, but to pull out her phone. She took a photo. The click of the camera shutter cut through the silence. "Mom, that's hilarious," Carla laughed, showing the photo to her sister. "Look at his face. It's just a joke, Danny. Don't be so sensitive." Danny didn't move. He stood there, this small 6-year-old boy with unwanted written across his forehead in permanent ink, staring at nothing. Not crying, not running, just blank. And something inside me broke. Not the dramatic, explosive kind of breaking. The quiet kind. The kind that changes the molecular structure of who you are. I walked across that perfect lawn, my footsteps steady, and knelt in front of my son. I looked into his eyes, my eyes, not the Brennan blue, and I saw what this moment was doing to him. What would do to him if I let it stand? "It's the right time," I said quietly, just for him. Danny blinked. He didn't understand, but he would. I stood up and pulled out my phone. My hands didn't shake as I scrolled to a contact I'd hoped I'd never have to use. Jeremy Paul, my old editor from my journalism days, now the senior producer at National News Network. The crowd was still laughing, Belinda accepting congratulations like she'd done something clever, when I press call. Jeremy answered on the second ring. "Greg, it's been 2 years, man." "What?" "I need you to run a story," I said, my voice calm and cold. "Multiple stories. I'm sending you documentation in the next hour on the Brennan family. Financial fraud, tax evasion, building code violations they've paid to cover up. Start with Brennan Properties. Then I'll give you the rest. Silence on the other end. Jesus, Greg. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Okay, send it all. We'll mobilize the team. The call lasted 45 seconds. While I lowered the phone, Belinda was staring at me, her smile fading. Oscar had stopped mid-sentence. Carla was walking toward me, confusion on her face. Greg, what are you doing? Who were you calling? I picked up Danny, his small body trembling against my chest, that word still scrawled across his forehead. I'm at my wife's eyes. Getting our son out of here, I said. You can come with us or stay with your family. Your choice. She looked at Danny, then at her mother, then back at me. She stayed. I walked through that crowd of 50 relatives, carrying my son, and not one person tried to stop me. They were still laughing, still treating it like a joke, completely unaware that the call I'd just made would unravel every carefully constructed lie the Brennan family had built over 3 generations. The fallout would last 3 years. But that night, as I sat in Danny's room scrubbing permanent marker off his forehead with rubbing alcohol while he finally cried, I only cared about one thing. I had chosen my son, and I would make them all pay for making him feel unwanted. The documentation I've been quietly collecting for 18 months filled 3 external hard drives and 17 cloud folders. Every suspicious conversation I'd overheard at family dinners. Every financial document Carla had carelessly left open on our shared computer. Every text message where Belinda had said something cruel about Danny that Carla had screenshotted and sent to her siblings with laughing emojis. I worked through the night while Danny slept fitfully in his bed, organizing files and creating a comprehensive narrative that Jeremy's investigation team could follow. By 4 a.m., I'd uploaded everything to a secure server and sent Jeremy the access codes. My phone buzzed at 6 a.m. Jeremy calling. This is bigger than you told me, he said, his voice tight with excitement. Greg, the building code violations alone could bring criminal charges. And the tax stuff? If the IRS sees this. Make sure they do, I said. Your wife is going to know this came from you. I know. This is scorched earth. You understand that. I looked at Danny's closed bedroom door. Completely. Carla came home at 8. Smelling like her mother's perfume and wine. She found me in the kitchen, drinking coffee, already showered and dressed for war. We need to talk, she said, her voice sharp. Yes, we do. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her arms crossed. You humiliated me yesterday. Walking out like that, making a scene. Your mother wrote unwanted on our son's forehead with a permanent marker. I interrupted, my voice level. You took a photo and called it a joke. And you want to talk about humiliation? It was a joke, Greg. You're blowing this out of proportion like you always do. Where did you sleep last night? She blinked. I stayed at my parents'. I needed space. You left Danny the night after he was publicly humiliated by your family. He's fine. Kids are resilient. I leaned forward. He cried himself to sleep. For 3 hours. Do you even care? Of course I care. He's my son. Then act like it. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm done with this. I'm done with you always attacking my family. Maybe my mother had a point. Maybe you're not right for this family. Maybe you're right, I said quietly. Maybe I'm not. Her eyes widened slightly. She'd expected me to fight, to apologize, to back down like I had 100 times before. I filed for divorce. I continued. Tony is handling it. You'll be served papers by noon. I'm seeking full custody of Danny based on documented evidence of emotional abuse and neglect from you and your family. The color drained from her face. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. You'll never get custody. My father has the best lawyers in Connecticut. Your father is about to be investigated by federal authorities for financial crimes spanning a decade. Your mother is about to be named in multiple building code violation complaints. And you, Carla, are about to be exposed as complicit in the emotional abuse of your own child. I have 17 months of documentation. Text messages where you mocked Danny to your siblings. Photos you took of him crying that you sent to your family with laughing emojis. Voicemails from your mother calling him defective that you never defended him against. She was shaking now. Where? How did you? I'm an investigative journalist. Carla, it's what I do. Or, did you forget that when you were leaving your computer unlocked and your phone on the counter? This is insane. You've lost your mind. Get out of my house. It's our house, not according to the deed. I purchased this property 3 years ago in my name only. You signed a prenup, remember? One your father's lawyers drafted to protect the Brennan assets. It works both ways. I'd spent the last year quietly disentangling our finances, moving assets, preparing for this exact moment. Tony had helped me, setting up trusts and protections that even Oscar's expensive attorneys wouldn't see coming. Carla stood there, stunned, as the reality of her situation finally penetrated. You've been planning this. I've been protecting my son. There's a difference. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then turned back. You're going to regret this. My family will destroy you. No, I said, I'm going to destroy them. Tell your mother the first story runs tonight at 7. She'll want to watch. Jeremy's story aired on the national news that evening, a 12-minute investigative piece titled Connecticut Real Estate Empire Built on Fraud. The footage was devastating. Interviews with contractors who'd been pressured to falsify inspection reports, tenants who'd lived in buildings with code violations, former Brennan Properties employees who detailed systematic tax fraud. Oscar Brennan's face filled the screen as a reporter ambushed him outside his office. No comment. He kept repeating his usual polish cracking. The story went viral within hours. By midnight, the IRS had announced an investigation. By morning, the Connecticut Attorney General's office had opened a criminal inquiry. I watched it all from my living room, Danny asleep upstairs, unaware that his father had just detonated a bomb under his entire maternal family. Tony came by around 10 with a bottle of scotch. You really did it, he said, pouring us both generous glasses. The legal community is buzzing. Oscar's lawyers are scrambling. Good. Carla filed a countersuit this afternoon. She's claiming you're an unfit parent, that you've been neglecting Danny, that you're mentally unstable. I'd expected that. What's her evidence? None. It's desperation. But Greg, you need to be prepared. She's going to play the victim. Rich, beautiful woman abandoned by her unstable husband. Some people will buy it. Let them. I have the truth. Tony studied me over his glass. You've changed. The Greg I knew 2 years ago wouldn't have done this. The Greg from 2 years ago hadn't watched his son soul break in front of 50 people while his mother took photos. We sat in silence for a moment. There's more coming, isn't there? Tony asked. Much more. The second wave hit 3 days later. A detailed expose on Belinda Brennan's charitable foundation, a tax shelter that funneled money to family members disguised as consulting fees. Jeremy's team had traced every transaction, interviewed employees who'd been forced to sign fake timesheets, documented the luxurious charity events that were really family vacations. Belinda's carefully cultivated image as a philanthropist crumbled overnight. The society pages that had once fawned over her now ran correction articles. Charity boards began quietly removing her name. Sean Brennan, the Golden Boy VP, was implicated in a kickback scheme with contractors. His promotion wasn't merit. It was payment for helping hide the family's fraud. He resigned within 48 hours of the story breaking. Celeste, who'd always been so smug about the family name, was revealed to be living on a trust fund built on stolen money. Her social circle evaporated like morning mist. But I wasn't done. I'd saved the worst for Carla. The custody battle began in earnest 3 weeks after I'd filed for divorce. Carla showed up to the first hearing in a demure dress, her hair pulled back, playing the role of concerned mother. Her lawyers painted me as unstable, vindictive, using my son as a weapon against his mother's family. I let them talk. Then Tony presented our evidence. Text messages where Carla had called Danny exhausting and a mistake. Photos she'd shared in the family group chat mocking his speech therapy. A video, one I'd secretly recorded, of her telling her mother that she'd only agreed to have a baby to keep Greg happy and that she regretted it sometimes. The judge's expression darkened with each piece of evidence. But the final blow was the recording from the family reunion itself. I'd been wearing a small audio recorder, a habit from my journalism days. The judge listened to the entire incident, Belinda's cruel words, the crowd's laughter, Carla's voice calling it hilarious. And then Danny's quiet sob that only I had been close enough to hear. The courtroom was silent when the recording ended. Mrs. Levine, the judge said, her voice like ice, "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Carla's lawyers whispered urgently to her. She looked at me, her eyes filled with something between hatred and disbelief, then back at the judge. "It was taken out of context," she managed. "Context," the judge repeated. "I see. I'm granting Mr. Levine temporary full custody, pending a full psychological evaluation of both parents. Mrs. Levine, you will be allowed supervised visitation only. This hearing is adjourned." Carla's scream of protest followed me out of the courtroom. The dominoes continued to fall throughout the summer. Oscar was indicted on 14 counts of fraud. Belinda faced criminal charges for her foundation scam. Sean was sued by his former company. Celeste's husband filed for divorce, not wanting to be associated with the Brennan name anymore. But the real punishment was social. The Greenwich community that had once celebrated the Brennans now shunned them. Country club memberships were revoked. Charity boards removed their names. Friends stopped returning calls. I watched it all unfold with the cold satisfaction of someone who'd spent years being made to feel inadequate, finally proving that he'd been the only decent person in the room all along. Danny started to heal. We found a new therapist, Dr. Sarah Chun, who specialized in childhood trauma. Slowly, my son began to smile again. His speech improved. He started playing with other kids at the park instead of sitting alone. "He's resilient," Dr. Chun told me during one of our private sessions. "But he'll remember this. Make sure he remembers that you protected him." That's all I ever wanted to do. Carla's supervised visits were awkward, tense affairs. She'd show up with expensive toys, trying to buy his affection, but Danny would barely look at her. The betrayal was too fresh, too deep. "Why didn't you help me, Mom?" he asked her during one visit, his voice small and devastating. "When Grandma hurt me, why didn't you help?" Carla had no answer. The psychological evaluations came back in September. Dr. Marcus Rivera, the court-appointed psychologist, spent 3 weeks interviewing both Carla and me, observing our interactions with Danny, reviewing the case history. His report was damning for Carla. Mrs. Levine displays a pattern of prioritizing familial loyalty over her child's well-being. She demonstrates limited insight into the emotional damage caused by her actions and those of her extended family. Her parenting decisions appear to be heavily influenced by her mother, showing a lack of independent judgment necessary for healthy child rearing. For me, Mr. Levine demonstrates strong protective instincts and appropriate parental boundaries. He has prioritized his son's emotional safety and well-being, even at significant personal cost. He shows insight into the trauma his son experienced and has taken active steps to facilitate healing. The final custody hearing was in October. The Brennan family showed up in force. Oscar out on bail, Belinda wearing her victimhood like armor, Sean and Celeste flanking their sister. They thought their money and connections could still turn the tide. They were wrong. Judge Martha Reynolds read through the evaluations, the evidence, the testimony of Danny's therapist. Then she looked at Carla with something close to pity. "Mrs. Levine, I'm granting Mr. Levine full legal and physical custody of Daniel Levine. You will be allowed visitation, supervised for the first 6 months, then unsupervised, pending successful completion of a parenting course and family therapy. Additionally, I'm issuing a restraining order preventing Belinda Brennan from any contact with a minor child." Belinda lurched to her feet. "You can't do that. He's my grandson." "Mrs. Brennan, I can and I have. Your actions at the family gathering constituted emotional abuse. You will have no contact with this child until such time as you complete a court-mandated therapy program and receive written approval from a court. If you violate this order, you will be held in contempt." Belinda's face twisted with rage, but Oscar pulled her back into her seat. The judge continued, "Furthermore, Mr. Levine's legal fees will be paid by Mrs. Levine as part of the divorce settlement. This case represents a clear pattern of one parent protecting a child while the other enabled abuse. The court will not reward such behavior." Carla was crying now, mascara running down her perfectly made-up face. But there was anger there too, directed at me. As if I was the villain in this story. As if I'd done something wrong by protecting our son. I felt nothing looking at her. The woman I'd married was gone, or maybe she'd never existed. Maybe I'd been in love with a carefully constructed image, the version of Carla that existed only when her family wasn't watching. Tony clapped me on the shoulder as we left the courtroom. "It's over, Greg. You won." "No," I said, looking back at the Brennan family huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck. "They lost. There's a difference." The divorce was finalized in November. Carla got a small settlement, much less than her father's lawyers had hoped for, and I got Danny. The house stayed mine. The car stayed mine. The life we built stayed mine. Because I'd built it. Not us. Me. The Brennan properties empire collapsed under the weight of investigations and lawsuits. Oscar took a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison for fraud. Belinda's foundation was dissolved, and she was sentenced to 2 years house arrest and 5 years probation. Sean lost his career in real estate. Celeste moved to California, trying to escape the name. And Carla? She moved back in with what was left of her family, a 34-year-old woman living in her childhood bedroom, visiting her son twice a week under the watchful eye of a court-appointed supervisor. But my revenge went deeper than their financial and legal troubles. I'd expose them to the one thing their money couldn't protect them from, the truth. Jeremy's reporting had won awards. The story of the Brennan family corruption became a cautionary tale taught in journalism schools. Their name became synonymous with entitled fraud. But I had one final card to play. The anonymous website appeared online in January, 3 years after the initial incident. Someone, not me, officially, had created a comprehensive archive of the Brennan family's misdeeds. Court documents, interview transcripts, financial records, all meticulously organized and searchable. But the homepage featured only one thing, the photo Carla had taken at the family reunion. Danny's face, unwanted written across his forehead, standing alone while 50 relatives watched and laughed. Below it, a single caption. This is what the Brennan family considered a joke. The website went viral. It was shared millions of times. News outlets picked it up. Influencers discussed it. The photo became a symbol of toxic family dynamics, of cruelty disguised as humor, of the moment when someone finally said enough. Carla called me, hysterical. "How could you? That's our son. You said you wanted to protect him, and you put his face all over the internet." "I didn't create the website," I said calmly. "But I'm not sorry it exists. The world deserves to know what you and your family are really like. You're a monster." "No, Carla. I'm a father. There's a difference." I hung up. The truth was, I hadn't created the website, but I'd given all the materials to Jeremy, who'd given them to a tech-savvy colleague, who'd given them to an anonymous source. Plausible deniability. A journalist's trick. The website stayed up. The Brennan name was permanently tainted. Every time someone Googled them, that photo appeared. Every job application, every social interaction, every attempt to rebuild, that image of cruelty would be waiting. Danny turned 9 in March of the 3rd year. We celebrated at our house, the house that was truly ours now, with his friends from school, his soccer teammates, kids who liked him for who he was. No Brennans were invited. Carla came for her scheduled visit the next day, bringing an expensive remote control car that Danny thanked her for politely, but showed no real interest in. They sat in our backyard, the supervisor watching from a distance, and tried to have a conversation. "How was your party?" Carla asked. "Good. What did you wish for when you blew out your candles?" Danny looked at her with those dark eyes, my eyes, and said, "That you'd understand why Dad left you." Carla flinched. "Danny, that's not fair." "You took a picture," he said quietly. "When Grandma hurt me, you took a picture and laughed." "What?" She had no answer. She never had an answer. Danny stood up. "I have homework. Can we be done now?" The supervisor nodded, and Danny walked back into the house without looking back at his mother. Carla sat in the yard for a long time after that, crying. I watched from the kitchen window, feeling nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just the quiet certainty that I'd done the right thing. She'd chosen her family over our son. Now she had to live with that choice. The 3-year mark arrived in August. The anniversary of the incident. I'd taken Danny camping in Vermont, far from Connecticut and the memories. We hiked, fished, roasted marshmallows, and talked about everything except the Brennans. On our last night, sitting by the campfire, Danny asked, "Dad, do you think Mom will ever understand?" I consider the question carefully. I think your mom loves you, buddy, but she loves the idea of her family more. Some people never learn to choose differently. But you chose me. Every time. Without question. He smiled. That beautiful smile that had been missing for so long after the reunion. I'm glad you're my dad. I'm glad you're my son. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Danny fell asleep against my shoulder, trusting and safe. I thought about the phone call I'd made 3 years ago. 45 seconds that had changed everything. The call that had destroyed a family empire, ended a marriage, and set in motion a cascade of consequences that was still reverberating through Connecticut society. Some people might call it extreme, vindictive, overkill, but they hadn't seen Danny's face that day. They hadn't heard him cry himself to sleep. They hadn't watched a 6-year-old boy learn that his own mother valued her family's approval more than his dignity. The Brennans had thought they were untouchable, that their money and connections would protect them, that a nobody like me, just a journalist, just an outsider, couldn't hurt them. They'd been wrong. The final chapter came in the form of a letter delivered to my office 5 weeks later. It was from Oscar Brennan, written from federal prison. Gregory, I'm not writing to apologize or to ask for forgiveness. I'm writing because I want you to know that I finally understand. You weren't the problem. We were. Belinda and I built an empire on lies and shortcuts. We raised our children to value the Brennan name above everything else. Integrity, compassion, even their own children. We taught Carla that family loyalty meant blind obedience. And when she had a son, she taught him the same lesson we taught her. Until you showed her there was another way. I lost everything. My business, my freedom, my reputation. But the worst loss is knowing that I destroyed my relationship with my grandson because I couldn't see past my own arrogance. Danny will grow up without knowing me, and that's my punishment. A punishment I earned. You protected your son when we failed him. For that, I respect you. It's the only thing about this entire catastrophe that I can respect. Oscar Brennan. I read the letter twice, then filed it away. Not as vindication. Not as victory. Just as a record of what happened when someone finally stood up to the Brennan family machine. Danny came home from school that afternoon, dropped his backpack by the door, and immediately started telling me about a science project he was working on. His speech was clear now. His confidence had returned. He had friends, hobbies, a life that didn't revolve around pleasing impossible-to-please grandparents. He was wanted, and I had made sure he knew it. Carla continued her visits, trying to rebuild a relationship that might never be fully repaired. Sometimes I felt sorry for her. But then I'd remember the photo, the laughter, the choice she'd made to prioritize her mother's cruelty over her son's well-being. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. On the anniversary of the final custody ruling, Tony took me out for drinks. We sat at the same bar where he'd warned me years ago to protect myself. "You did it," he said, raising his glass. "You took down an entire family empire and got your son back. How does it feel?" I thought about the question. How did it feel? "It feels like I can breathe again," I said finally. Like I'm not constantly waiting for the next cruel comment, the next humiliation, the next time I have to choose between keeping the peace and protecting my son. You know, they're calling you ruthless in the legal community. The journalist who destroyed the Brennans. Let them call me whatever they want. I call myself a father. Tony smiled. To being a father, then? We clinked glasses. The fallout had lasted 3 years, just like I'd known it would. 3 years of investigations, trials, appeals, custody battles, and social destruction. 3 years of watching the Brennan empire crumble piece by piece. But the real timeline was different. The real change had happened in 45 seconds. The length of a phone call. The moment I decided that my son's well-being mattered more than my marriage, my comfort, or my fear of what came next. Everything after that was just consequences playing out in slow motion. Danny is 12 now. He's on a soccer team, gets good grades, and has a core group of friends who come over to play video games on weekends. He still sees his mother, though their relationship is strained and formal. He asks about the Brennans sometimes, but only in the abstract way you'd ask about distant relatives you barely remember. The permanent marker came off his forehead after a week of scrubbing and special cleaners. But the mark it left on his psyche took years to fade. Dr. Chun says he's resilient, that he'll be okay, that having at least one parent who chose him unconditionally gave him a foundation to build on. I hope she's right. The website still exists, though I stopped checking it long ago. The Brennan name remains synonymous with corruption and cruelty. Oscar serves his sentence. Belinda complies with her probation, isolated and bitter. Sean works a mediocre job in Boston. Celeste remarried under her new husband's name. And Carla? She's tried to rebuild, taking the parenting classes, attending therapy, showing up for her visits with Danny. But there's a sadness in her eyes now, a recognition of what she lost when she chose her mother over her son. Some lessons come too late. As for me, I went back to journalism. Freelance work mostly, exposing corruption and protecting people who can't protect themselves. I'm good at it. Years of watching the Brennans operate taught me every trick in the book. And I sleep well at night, because when my son looks at me, he sees someone who protected him, someone who chose him, someone who stood between him and the people who wanted to make him feel unwanted. He sees his father, and that's all I ever wanted to be. The 45-second phone call changed everything. But really, it was just the beginning of the rest of our lives. Lives where we don't apologize for demanding basic human decency. Lives where cruelty dressed up as humor gets called out and punished. Lives where a child knows, beyond any doubt, that he is wanted. 3 years of fallout for 45 seconds of choice. I'd make that call again in a heartbeat. Every single time. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.